Robots in love. What more can you ask for? Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and it's true, today we've got robots in love, in space, and kind of on Earth too. It's all good, man, because it's Wall-E, and I am very excited to have with us for the Q&A co-writer and director Andrew Stanton. I think Wall-E, without a doubt, is one of the best original screenplays of the year. It was based on a story by Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter, and a screenplay by Andrew Stanton and Jim Reardon, and I look forward to seeing it nominated later in the year because it really is a fantastic piece of writing that thinks outside the box. Of course, it doesn't hurt that it's a fantastic film either. Definitely make sure to check back at least once or twice a week because you're never going to know what we're going to be podcasting during the upcoming awards season. Of course, if you're curious about what we've been writing about in Creative Screenwriting Magazine, you could check at our website, www.creativescreenwriting.com, to see all the details of the latest issue, which you could purchase in Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops and newsstands in the United States, Canada, the UK, and Western Europe. Of course, if you want to subscribe as a podcast listener, the coupon code CSPodcast will get you a discount off of our already very affordable subscription rate, so look into that as well. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of our sold-out screening as I announced co-writer and director Andrew Stanton to talk about his latest film, Wall-E.
Hi. Hello.
All right, so we're going to start moderated as we always do, then we're going to open it up to the crowd.
All right.
This is your life. We always...
Okay.
I know, don't get scared. We always start with breaking in. You went to Cal Arts.
Yeah, like almost anybody in animation.
I know. It was a program that was started by Walt Disney himself. Talk about your experience as an animation student at Cal Arts.
Well, you got to remember when I have a very similar story to a lot of people my age. It was in the early 80s, late 70s, and we thought pretty much that animation was done a long time ago by old men that were no longer alive, and so I had no idea that you could choose this as a career path, and the golden age of animation sort of returning hadn't happened at all, and I was in my guidance counselor's office in high school and not knowing whether I wanted to become an animator, or not becoming an actor, a comic book artist, or a rock star, and none of them looking that viable at the time. And then I saw this binder for all the handbooks for all the colleges that was hot fluorescent orange, sort of calling out, and I pulled it out, and it was a program for Cal Arts, which I had no knowledge of. And all of us have compared these stories that have now gone to the school. Once we found out that it existed, we were like, there's a school that teaches you how to animate? Oh my God. It was like Devil's Tower, in Close Encounters. We were just like, I have to go. And then it was like I was just myopic. It was just hell-bent on going there. And so it took me, it was much harder to get into then. They only accepted 25 students a year. And they never accepted anybody straight out of high school, so I had to go to another school to get a little bit more credentials and stuff. And so I went in there in there and
that was a time of transition for animation.
I remember in my sophomore year, there was this. It came really close to Disney just being shut down just before Katzenberg and Eisner and everybody came over. And so we were all like, "Hey, how does it feel to learn a career that we'll never be able to do?" And it was really dire. And so who would have known we were right there at the right time, just at the cusp of everything just going huge.
And we're going to talk about that because you were there on the ground floor at Pixar. But first, just going back for a second to some of the great teachers you had, to my knowledge, at a certain point, the men referred to as the 9 old men from Disney Animation were also at Cal Arts. Were any of them still there when you were there,
or
were they gone?
No, there were guys that had worked just under them, sort of the invisible 12 old men, the people that had almost done just as much work as the 9 old men, but never, I guess, really got into that little inner circle. And we had an amazing teacher named Hal Ambro, who taught us a lot of stuff. And the head of the department was a guy named Bob McRae, who had also been a Disney animator. Teehee, he's a very famous designer in our first year. But I seemed to pick the year where they all started to die. And it was kind of really sad. You're like, come on, one more semester. And But you really did feel like you were sort of touching history. It was amazing.
There's a number in a letter A113 that's appeared in a lot of Pixar films. That was a room at Cal Arts, right?
Yeah, it was a room that was downstairs on the bottom floor where it was the classroom in John Lasseter's and Brad Bird's year, where they were 9 years ahead of me. And then the whole department moved upstairs, and it just became where we did life drawing. And Brad started that. And when Amazing Stories was this television show, he did a film called an animated film called Family Dog, and he started the idea by having a license plate say A113 on it. And so when we had the chance to do Toy Story, we just thought we'd carry on that tradition, not knowing that it would truly keep going on.
And in tonight's film, it's the secret directive number.
Yeah, it's the most bold we've ever been with it. So,
when you graduated, you went, to my knowledge, right into writing on Ralph Baksh's The Amazing Adventures of Mighty Mouse. And you did it with your writing partner on this film, Jim Reardon. Yeah. Talk about you and Jim kind of being in college together and getting your first job right out of Cal Arts.
Well, I was with an amazing class. Pretty much everybody was better than me at something. You know, they're better animators, better story guys, better designers. I just loved doing the whole. I always loved sort of the whole, let's put on a show aspect of it, not knowing that means you want to be the director. I had no idea that's really what it meant. So I was never that impressive in my portfolio, and that's really how you got into animation, was one task. There's a certain task you were very good at, and just to get into the machinery. And so that was always difficult for me. So I was really grateful, because Jim kind of knew I was good in the room and funny and stuff. And so when he was an hysterically funny writer, and so he worked for Ralph and was sort of the one that suggested me. Frankly, Ralph just wanted people that were cheap. And he didn't want to go through television writers. He just wanted young guys that were cheap and he could pay no money. And we were happy to have the job. So, but it was always an amazing story with Ralph Bakshi. Every day you knew you were going to go home with an amazing story, because he was a one of a kind.
Talk about getting your first job at Pixar. To my knowledge, they moved you into a commercial division, and you were on Trident commercials. Do I even have that right?
Well, you got to remember again, Roger Rabbit hadn't come out yet. That was really, to me, that and Little Mermaids really where things started to slowly turn. And so what was very common is that you worked about, if you weren't working at Disney, you basically were working 3 months here, 3 months there, and with a lot of breaks in between. And I was pretty much hand to mouth like that for 2 or 3 years. And the only thing that sort of kept me afloat was these 2 student films I had done at Cal Arts that made it into the Spike and Mike Festival of Animation that ran up and down.
A classic festival that was getting cutting-edge animation out to the world.
And John Lasseter had his shorts, Luxo Jr., Red's Dream, and then Tin Toy going in there. And that's how he and I met, was when our shorts, we were visiting artists. And I'm sorry, I'm going to make a long story out of this, but
please.
My high school sweetheart, she and I went to different colleges and stayed engaged. Then we got married when I was 2 or 3 years out of college, and she finally moved out to LA, and she hated it. And we were like 6 months into living together, and we just had our first knockdown, drag-out fight, and I was again hand to mouth with the business and the work, and we just got in this argument about, like, honey, there's no other place to animate. There's a couple places in New York. I don't even know if they're going to be around in a year or two. LA's really the place. I mean, I know John's got this place Pixar, but I think it's like 3 guys. There's really no option. And literally the next morning, out of the blue, John Lasseter called me and said, dude, I finally have money. We can hire another animator. Do you want to come up and work for me? And it was the most serendipitous phone call of my life. That is literally the defining moment of my career. And so that's pretty much why I've given 200% ever since, and always will, just because I was honestly really considering leaving the business, because I wasn't finding a lot of work. I was feeling like I was going to go down a path where I was just a pencil and a number. But I was getting just enough satisfaction as an artistic identity with these shorts, but there was no money or career to be made out of that. But that ended up being the best calling card I ever could have, because it's what made John call me, so it was huge.
That's incredible. Now, but when you were up there, you were working on commercials, right?
Yeah, and then, to be honest, I was happy as a clam. I'm like, I'm going to get a full paycheck. I'm going to have health insurance. Oh my gosh, and I don't.
And Trident, go.
And my wife's going to stay with me now, because we're going to be up in San Francisco. So it was all a win-win. So I was happy. I had never touched a computer. I didn't like computers. I didn't like computer animation. All there was flying logos at the time. So it all seemed stupid to me.
Actually, what was your learning curve like to kind of get into the groove on computers?
It was hard. Yeah, that Trident commercial nearly killed me. I had to do a leaf that played jazz on a piano while an Ice Cube sang doo-wop on the top. And it's just a diamond flat graphic in a cube. That's all it was, and it nearly killed me. I stayed up all night. I was working so hard, and I remember dreaming in the format of the software that I was looking at. That's when you know when you're working too hard on something. But honestly, I thought that was my career. I thought this is what I've signed up for. But I love working here. These people are fun. It's sort of out of the norm. It's this brand new technology. Nobody ever talked about doing a feature or any of that stuff. That didn't happen until about 2 years in. And it was just luck. I mean, he had hired Pete Docter, who was sort of the wonderkin from 3 years after me at CalArts.
And he has story by credit on tonight's film.
Yeah, and the three of us pretty much were these three musketeers for about 2 or 3 years on commercials. And it was just like playing house. We'd be like, okay, you be the director this time, I'll storyboard, and you animate. And then we'll switch to the next one. And so we just became this think tank team. And little did I know at the time that Disney had been trying to woo John for a long time about, please come back, we'll pay you a lot of money, we'll make you a big director. And he just didn't want to leave. He knew he was onto something with this computer graphics stuff. And so they finally acquiesced and said, okay, how about you guys make a movie and we'll just distribute it and just whatever you want to make. And so suddenly Pete and I find ourselves sitting in the room with John because we're the muses that he's always had and go, okay, we get to make a movie, what do you want to do? And that is the scariest place to ever be in. It's just this big blank canvas, and you got this one shot. And what do you want to do? It was pretty wild.
On the DVD of WALL-E, there's a special feature of a documentary by Leslie Iwerks, which was really incredible, and it kind of showed the early roots of Pixar and how Steve Jobs got involved to kind of fund $1 million lost per year for 5 years straight, but because he knew something was going on there. It was kind of like early United Artists when Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and Chaplin came together. Who did I forget? Along with D.W. Griffith, that's right. In which you guys really were following your bliss. You were doing whatever you wanted. You just stopped when you were talking about creating Toy Story. How did that kind of materialize in front of you? I want to talk about a few Pixar films, and I swear we're going to get to this one.
Oh, that's fine.
But just because you're sitting right here and you were Academy Award nominated for the screenplay of that film with the other writers. Talk about breaking that story.
Well, I mean, it was honestly just simple logic. John knew he had scratched the surface of something special with his Tin Toy short that he had won the Oscar for. And so we thought, there's probably more to be mined from this. And we had this simple idea of thinking, well, we couldn't handle a feature. All we've ever done is commercials, so maybe we should just lower our appetite and we can do a Christmas special, like for TV. And so we had this idea that Tinny from Tin Toy would be the main character, and we had this charming little old cobbler shop with the 3 tin toys, and I barely remember it now. But then basically Disney said, look, there's no money, it's going to cost so much to make this short, you just jump in the pool and try a feature. And we're like, okay. So we the original idea of Toy Story was a Rip Van Winkle story, where Tinny was in an old shop and then boxed up in the attic, and it became this huge chain like Toys R Us. And you cut to 20, 30 years later, the box is found, and he's opened up, and suddenly he finds himself in this city of different aisles and trying to find his original owner. And that eventually morphed into a road picture with him in a ventriloquist dummy, which then turned into a spaceman toy and a ventriloquist dummy, and then we thought it should be the opposite of a spaceman, so it became a cowboy. And so it's like it didn't all come in this one big epiphany. It was sort of this, I like to say, making movies by Braille. You're just sort of blindly figuring it out as you go along.
Feeling your way. At a certain point, you guys were almost shut down because the character of Woody was such kind of a bully almost, and he had that edge that you guys probably appreciated when you were doing Spike and Mike. Was that a big turning point on the film?
I don't want to point fingers, but we were basically young and naive and did whatever we were told. So we were told, make it edgier, make it edgier, make them edgier, and to the point that we were going against our instincts, and the thing didn't work. And out of sheer desperation and fear that the whole thing was just going to be taken away from us, we holed ourselves up for about 3 weeks at Pixar and sort of held Disney off bay and said, let's just make what the heck we would have wanted to have seen. And that's pretty much the foundation of what you now know as Toy Story. So it made us, it was a big lesson for us to listen to our gut.
What was the toughest scene? What was the scene you kept coming back to again and again that you may or may not still have nightmares about on Toy Story today?
I'll be honest, I don't have any nightmare sequences on Toy Story.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just because, again, we were too dumb and stupid to know how hard it was and how hard we were working. We kept equating it to the guys in NASA, that the engineers that were too young to know you can't put a man on the moon, they just did it anyway. And I think we sort of had that same naive mentality and drive on Toy Story.
You graduated to co-director with John Lasseter on Bug's Life.
Yeah.
Another great hit. You were also a co-writer on the film. Talk about that bump of kind of going from story guy to co-director.
This is going back to Toy Story a bit, but I had, went to movies my whole life. I did not do sports. I did not do all this other stuff. What my family did was went to the movies. We went to the movies every weekend. And we were always watching movies on TV whenever they were. There was no videotape then and stuff. So we were just junkies, just went to the movies. So I loved movies, but I never really ever thought I'd be behind the camera. I mean, I even made movies with my friends, but I just never saw it as a possibility. So I was just a sponge when I wanted to know how this whole process was done when we were making Toy Story. And we actually finally ended up with a screenwriter that for about 6 to 8 months who really got us off on the right foot was Joss Whedon, who everybody knows now for Buffy and Firefly and all that stuff. And it was fascinating because we read lots of scripts thinking maybe this is what a good script is. Well, this was until we read his. And we read Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie script, before it ever got made, which was a fascinating lesson for me of how a good script can get poorly made, which you rarely get that kind of insight. But his pages just, like when you read them, I saw the movie. And I'd never read any other scripts that did that. And so I really realized, there's something different. So to sit with a guy who you sat in a room just knocking out ideas like we would all the time, like we would for our shorts or for commercials, but then see him go off into a room and then come out after a half a day and the pages would capture what we had talked about in a way that was really special. I really started to appreciate what an art form it was and that there was a real uniqueness to it and that you didn't just write down what you were going to do. So I sort of watched from afar, and then he got, really famous and big and had to leave. He couldn't stay for the entire 3-4 years we were going to be on this thing. So I just said, I think I want to give it a shot at this. And so, Pete would say, like, yeah, go ahead. And I said, they're not paying me to write. They're paying me to storyboard and do this stuff. So what the heck? They're not going to fire me. They'll just say, stop writing. So what do I have to lose? And so I just started writing, and I figured when they tell me to stop, I'll stop, and nobody told me to stop. And so when the movie was finally going to come out, I had basically written about 70% of the movie, or in rewrites or whatever, and that sort of suddenly I found myself being a screenwriter. That's really how it happened.
And a co-director, though.
Well, that's because I never left John alone. When we were small, I was just really good at going like, no, John, I don't think that's a good idea. Or, yeah, it's a great idea. Just being his conscience, the guy that just wouldn't let it go.
Co-director / wingman.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. We made up the title co-director for our needs of we kept saying, it's Robin to Batman. And they go, oh, I get it. And or deputy to the sheriff. And we created that role because that's what I was doing on Toy Story, but it wasn't official. So we said, we should just make this an official title. And that's how that happened.
It's well known that Toy Story 2 was at one point heading to video. That was salvaged. It became a full-length feature, which was excellent. I love Monsters, Inc., but I do want to get to Finding Nemo in a second here. So is there any great war story that you could tell us about either Toy Story 2 or Monsters, Inc. briefly? Maybe like the toughest sequence of Monsters, Inc. with all the doors opening up and the amazing imaginative journey they took through the factory of doors. Or just anything that was a tough challenge writing it.
I had sort of a bookend experience with monsters. Toy Story 2 was a just like guerrilla attack. I think a lot of people know the story about that now, where we scrapped everything and we only had 8 months left to release, and we pretty much redid almost the entire film. And I rewrote that movie in 3 months. Which it took me 3 years to write the other movie. So and that really taught me a huge lesson that most of your time spent, even if you think you're dealing with plot, is about character. You're trying to come up with dimensional, interesting characters, and because Toy Story 2, we weren't coming up with new characters, particularly our main characters. it was like you could airdrop into any situation. Like, okay, Buzz and Woody are stuck on a desert island and they got to sell lemonade. Okay, and you'd have something. You'd have something within an hour or two, which I never had felt that before. So it really taught me that most of your efforts are there. Monsters, it was more of a favor. They were sort of in a rut. They didn't know how to get out of it. And just getting it really kind of kicked off into a structure. And I think most of the stuff I wrote changed a lot, but the big thing that I kind of added was giving rules to the whole world, like the whole conceit of Scream, and that it was their fossil fuel, and that it drove all the greed and all the desire and all the purpose of things. That was probably the biggest thing I added that stuck around. And then I pretty much just played coach from the sidelines all through it. But I was very busy trying to get Nemo off the ground during that.
You co-wrote and also co-directed, again, Finding Nemo. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. You were nominated with Bob Peterson and David Reynolds for the screenplay. Talk about breaking that story and this going again into the territory of Bug's life of dealing with animals. Still not humans really.
Well, I don't ever look at it like, okay, now we're going to deal with bugs, now we're going to deal with fish, only in the sense that let's be respectful and be as informed as we can about what those worlds are, what's unique about those species that you can take advantage of.
Is that the way you think of it, the world first?
Sometimes. I mean, that's often what gets you interested, but it's different every movie. Definitely for Nemo, I was interested in the underwater world from Toy Story days. I remember taking my infant son to an aquarium where they had this new exhibit where there was a wall that was about 10 feet by 12 feet, where you could basically stand up against it and imagine you were underwater. Your peripheral vision was still consumed by all the underwater, because I had never scuba dived. And I remember, finally understanding what was the strengths of computer graphics, and I said, we could do underwater so well. But I knew that wasn't a story, that's just a setting. And then I started to ruminate about this dentist's office I always went to as a kid, where there was a fish tank in the wall, and how weird that must have been for fish to be introduced to human life by watching them work on each other's teeth. And I just thought, that's really interesting. And how boring that would be, to watch the same scuba diver go up and down, plastic scuba diver and things. And so, but I even knew then, after going through 2 or 3 movies, that that's not enough for a story. What's it about? And this is, everybody knows this story now, but by then my son was 4 or 5, and I was so busy in A Bug's Life that I didn't feel I was seeing him enough or having enough quality time. So I was like, okay, we're going to go for a walk to the park today. I'm going to have some father-son time, and I had all this pressure on making it matter. And I just said, don't touch that. You're going to jump in the street. You'll poke your eye out. What are you doing? Come back here. And I pissed away the entire walk and realized that here I am, a dad with the best of intentions, having nothing but desire to love my son, and I can't get out of my own way. And I thought, that's a real dilemma. And then I got my brain going like, I don't think I've ever seen a film where it's the protagonist, at least a family film, but the protagonist is the parent. And then I said, well, why can't you do that? That's usually what gets us into these things. Well, why not? Why can't you do a movie like that? And then I remember always having a problem with Lion King and the whole circle of life thing. I didn't buy it. And so I said, you go to the wilderness and and they all want to eat you. And I thought that's more true to life, and wouldn't it be cool to try and work within those rules? You go underwater, everything's trying to eat you. And it's just like one big don't cross the street or be careful crossing the street 24/7. And so it was those 2 things that really made me go, okay, I think I'm onto something that set me off on Nemo.
What was your toughest scene for Nemo?
Oh, God, I don't know why that's such a hard question. I don't know. To be honest, I don't remember a scene being difficult. I remember trying to keep growth going on between the father, Marlon, and Dory, the Ellen DeGeneres character, and just making sure it didn't come across repetitive and annoying. And that there was, because, short-term memory, that's almost a huge risk right there. And so it was trying to find... Once I realized that what Dory was a surrogate for Nemo, and that it was allowing a proxy for father to be tested as a parent all the way through the film, that suddenly informed me what I was supposed to do with it as it went through the story. But that took a while to adjust just right.
Just because you brought it up, I was going to talk about it later, but I want to focus on it for a second. I mean, Pixar is an amazing company. We're going to talk about it a little more later, the way it works, but you know, it attracts the best and the brightest. Everyone feels a responsibility to give their best work, but it does, as you said, have a toll on the family. Again, in Leslie Eisenberg's documentary on the DVD, it has John Lasseter's wife talking about him being absent for a while. A lot of people don't realize that in great entertainment, there is kind of a pain and self-sacrifice going on in the background.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like for you, and how do you manage your family life with your work life?
Well, it's funny, whenever I'm giving a tour of Pixar, I get really bitter and cynical because people are like, oh, this is amazing. Where are the Oompa Loompas? Where's the Chocolate River? This is amazing. You must have so much fun. And I can't hide that it is a fun place, and the first impression and even second impression it gives is pretty Nirvana-esque. But it's to counter how friggin' intense and high anxiety the day is, because I said, the best I can equate is like I'm working with nothing but type A's and with Olympic athletes who they can't stop themselves from wanting to like do their personal best and then top it, and then if the person next to them did better, then they want to, it's not that competitive. It's more just like everybody wants to keep up with each other. Everybody wants to stay with the team, and that just takes its toll. So we're trying to counter it all the time with fun, so that you won't die. and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, the Pixar graveyard out back is not talked about that often.
Well, it really does take its toll. I mean, it's because you love it so much that, heck, I don't know how else to put it. You're having an affair. You are.
I like that,
because you love it. You're so passionate about it. It can consume your every waking thought, and you can still be there when you're home. And so it's really tough because you deep down I can only get the greatness if I let myself just indulge in the passion I have for this. But you can sometimes almost physically watch yourself cutting off or harming your family relationships because you can't let it go. It's hard.
At the same time, it's interesting as a company. I mean, I have a friend who works there. His name's Bill Zahn. He's in the art department. And he said there's a real follow your bliss atmosphere in which there's Pixar University set up so that storytelling and filmmaking is something that's encouraged on off hours should employees want to do it. I find it really fascinating.
Should employees have off hours?
Yeah, well, I mean, I find it fascinating.
I've never had off hours. I've never been to PU, frankly.
But I find it cool that that you guys internally encourage the study of film. And
I mean, we feel it's more, to be honest, the biggest reason we do it is because if we feel like even if for a couple hours a week, for a couple months, you walk in somebody else's shoes, you'll have a little bit more appreciation for what it is they have to do. Because you may be thinking too little about what it is they do, or you may be glorifying what they do too much, or mystifying, making it mystical or something. And And it just helps people understand everybody else a little bit better and have patience with each other, because your patience wears thin under duress.
And sparks creativity, which brings us to tonight's film. Oh my God. On Finding Nemo, to my knowledge, as you told our journalist Danny Munso in our July-August issue of Creative Screenwriting, the original idea for Wall-E was hatched under the title of Trash Planet.
Trash Planet, yeah.
Trash Planet, and it was at a time...
Which would have really killed it had I named it that.
It would have been awesome. And it was at a time when you kind of were blocked a little on Nemo, and you wanted to let your mind wander.
This is how I procrastinate. On Nemo, I had to do all these rewrites, and I was already busy in production, so I never had time, and I was begging for office time so I could just try to do these rewrites. And the minute I get the door closed, I would be like, I don't want to do this, and I'd throw the pencil in the ceiling, and like David Sedaris, want to see what my hair looked like parted in the middle, but I remember I play soundtrack music all the time to get myself sort of, and it's just like random shuffle until something hits that sort of fits the mood I was trying to go for, and then I probably loop that forever. And a section of Star Trek: The Motion Picture came up, and I suddenly remembered this little robot conceit that we had 7 years earlier. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then
it was when you were working on Toy Story.
When I was working on Toy Story, and then I started, writing that. and I found myself not being able to stop writing it. And my justification was like, well, it's procrastination, but it's productive procrastination, right? This is what I'm going to do later. So it can't be bad. And so I would beg for more time, and I spent a week writing that instead of rewriting a Nemo. And pretty much, the first 20 minutes of what you see in WALL-E is not that far off from what finally made it to the picture. So I've never done that before. I've never been that productive without effort on writing something. So I took that as a huge sign as this is probably what I want to do next. But I knew even then it was kind of unconventional, and would anybody go for it? So thank goodness Nemo was so huge, because it gave me the brass balls to say, nope, this is what I want to do next. And everybody had to say yes.
To my knowledge, you also, obviously you share a story by credit with Pete Docter, and then a screenplay credit with Jim Reardon. Talk about collaborating with them to break it and to move forward.
The Pete is because Pete and I came up with the concept in that Toy Story lunch, and he actually tried to run with it for a couple months.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he sort of ran with it from a comedic, cartoony slant, and we never knew, what. All we knew was it was a robot left on the planet, and collecting trash because it had evidence of us, and we didn't know why, what it was called, what would for, and it never really went anywhere. And I remember just before we just decided to close up shop on it, John and I started going, maybe it should be a love story, but we were just novices. We didn't know why. We just kind of felt right. But then Pete wasn't interested in that. It got boxed up, and by then he had this idea about fears visiting you in their closet and under your bed, and you know where that went. So. Yeah. He ran off with that. And so when I remembered this idea during Nemo 7 years later, it was just that simple conceit again of just little guy alone. But I had learned so much writing all these other movies, I was like, you know what? The reason this is so attractive is because it's like the epitome of loneliness. You can't think of a more lonely situation than this. It's the ultimate definition of futility. A guy doing something for no reason that's a waste of time forever. And I want to believe, I have to believe that even a machine after 700 years of doing that is finally going to go, there's got to be more to life than what I'm doing.
One would hope.
Which we all hit at some point in our life. And so I thought everybody will relate to that. And I knew the opposite of loneliness is love, so it has to be a love story. And that's when I went, it's organically asking me to put these two genres together. Sci-fi, which already felt fresh for animation, and a love story, which is so hard to do without it being melodramatic or cloying. And I thought maybe this was a way into one through sci-fi. And it just really kind of hit me that organically, and I never looked back.
Robots in Love.
Robots in Love, dude.
Now you're the sole director on this.
Yeah.
That was a change again. So how did you end up as sole director on this film? Because you had been co-directing previously.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't a co-director on Nemo. I was sole director on Nemo too. The way we do co-director is it's your right-hand man, your lieutenant. He's sort of watching things that you can't. It's like you're like one of the parents of the Brady Bunch or something. You just can't be there all at once, and you try to find somebody who has your same sensibilities that you're also hopefully courting to be a director eventually. So that's what I was really on Bug's Life. I was sort of being courted to learn by observing and being along John, and then we were doing the same for Lee, who's now doing Toy Story 3. So I pretty much felt like I was just getting to finally do the job after experience of Nemo again with full understanding of what I was up against with WALL-E.
That makes sense. I didn't realize how it works like that. What was the influence going all the way back to Pixar's short film of Luxo? How did that influence you for
WALL-E?
For WALL-E.
Well, because this is funny. When I was doing commercials for 2 or 3 years, the only calling card we had to show off our stuff to any clients was either Tin Toy or Luxo, and we ended up showing Luxo. And I had to watch that frickin'
Just
thing
for anyone who doesn't know the
times.
title, Luxo's the lamp, in case
yeah,
anyone
Luxo
doesn't.
Jr.'s the little lamp. It's our logo. And I had to watch that short like 10 times a day. And I'd be like, oh, not again. And every time I would get caught up in it. And I would just be charmed. It didn't matter, even though the idea of watching it again would get me down, then I'd be so, and I started to really believe that there was a unique entertainment to that lamp that was different than other silent and anthropomorphic characters. There was something about the fact that that lamp was already naturally designed that way. It was something that was already out there in the real world that when you looked at it, you couldn't help but want to throw a character on it. And I can totally remember that as a kid, wanting to do that to certain things. I thought my bike was cold in the rain. I thought, that my family car, the headlights were eyes or things. And so there's things that just evoke that out of you. And I started to think that that's a lot like how you feel when you see a baby or when you see a pet. it's this cute, animate thing that can't fully express itself, and you can't stop yourself from wanting to invest in it. You're like, oh, I think it likes me, I think it's hungry, I think it wants to come home with me. And it's like, you didn't even ask for that. You can't stop yourself. And I'm like, wouldn't it be amazing if you could come up with a Luxo Jr.-like character that did that to you for a whole feature? And that's so I always used him as sort of my guide for what I wanted to get out of Wally when we designed him.
And to my knowledge, you were at a baseball game holding binoculars, and that's what gave you the concept of Wally's eyes.
Well, the thing I knew that was part of the charm about Luxo was that it didn't look like you and I. It wasn't trying to have eyes like you and I. It wasn't trying to have a face. It was just a bulb in a cone, yet I saw a face in it. How does that happen? You know? And so I started to think, well, that's what I should do with the robot. Maybe I should just use a Luxo cone lamp and a single eye. But then I started to think maybe 70 minutes to 80 minutes would task you on something that simple. And then, I was at a baseball game and somebody passed me the binoculars. It was my editor on Nemo, as a matter of fact. We had such crappy seats that he handed me his binoculars. And I missed an entire inning because I turned them around. I started staring at them. I started making them go sad and mad. And I went, dude, how much for your binoculars? And I have such a neurotic editor, he was going, why? Why do you want them? And I said, I can't tell you, but I can, how much? And he goes, those are crappy. I have much better binoculars at home. I'm like, no, I said, they have to be these binoculars. Why? Why do you have to have them? And then this went on for like the rest of the game. And finally, he reluctantly sold them to me, and I said, I'll tell you in a couple of years why I need these. And now he knows why, but it was funny.
You probably should have asked for more for the sale of the binoculars. So, to my knowledge, like, talk about breaking with Jim. Like, when you guys co-wrote, did you use an outline? Did it work like that?
Yeah, I mean, how I work is I pretty much beat outline something. My feeling is that when you see a good movie and you walk out, doesn't matter what business you're in, if you really liked it and you start telling somebody else about this great movie you saw, you suddenly become a great storyteller. Even if you're kind of bad at it, it kind of gets across. And you go, oh, I got to go see that. And it made me really think that, like, if you've got the bones correct, then it should come across in the pitch. So I had this naive view of, this started on Nemo, that I would figure this out to the point that when I told it to you, it was as if I had seen it. And all I was doing was sort of rattling off how great this movie was that I saw. And so that was sort of the bar I set it at. And so that's what I do with anything. It's like, if I can't do that, and when I'm telling you, then that means I'm not ready. That means I haven't figured it all out. And I'm fully aware that it's going to change. I probably am sitting on broken bones that I don't know about. But it should at least do that. It should at least make you go, was that a movie you just watched? No, it's something I want to do, you know? And so that's what I did with Wally, as I got it to that point. And sure enough, it changed considerably, but when Jim came on, that's about where I was at. And for me, I'm the first to admit that as much as my ego would like to say, oh, I wrote it all, it's like, I do not write well in a vacuum. I have to have somebody to bounce something off of and to road test. And so I just learned halfway through Nemo to just stop trying to be the king and just, admit, like, look, it takes a village to get these things up. So I started writing with a guy named Bob Peterson, who's now a director. And it just made a world of difference. Suddenly, it's like there's a part of my brain that opens up, and I find myself, I get smarter, I'm funnier in the room. It just suddenly the things I want my brain to do happen because there's somebody else there. So I've just learned to embrace that. So I always need a writing partner. So like the film I'm doing now, I have another writing partner. It just is the way I work.
So when you and Jim were doing it, was one of you typing, one of you talking? Were you guys using paper?
It's different every person. But the way it ends up talking is that we'll talk about it in the room until it feels like we're finishing each other's sentences, and we're both going yeah. And I always like that the person I'm writing with to be the first volley. Here, you go write what you think we talked about, because I find I'm a much better reactionary person. I need something to look at to go, oh, wait a minute, now I see what maybe we should do to it. So then he'll send me the file or print it out, and then I'll look at it, and then I immediately, I can almost feel like a part of my brain open that wouldn't otherwise. And
it's the concept of nothing's truly written, things are only rewritten.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a complete believer that you discover the story, that it's buried somewhere, and you're just uncovering it.
You've described that before as like being on an archaeological dig.
Yeah, and I believe it more and more as each of these movies get made. I say it's like you basically say, look, I'm pretty sure that the idea of what we want to make is in the ground here. It's this dinosaur bones somewhere down in here, and I'm not sure what kind of dinosaur it is. I think I know, and we're going to sort of say it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you start digging. But you have no control over what bones are going to come up first. To think you do is a waste of time. It's like what you can control is how fast you can dig and how quickly you can get the bones up. But you have no control of what bones they are and whether you can identify them right away. Just start digging. And so you get these bones up and you go, okay, this is, look at it. I'm going to put all these bones together and there I have a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But if at the 11th hour you pull out a bone that doesn't match any of your plans, and you realize that your head bone was the tail bone, and you got to switch, are you going to have the intestinal fortitude to admit that you have actually a Stegosaurus and not a Tyrannosaurus Rex? And that's where Pixar shines. Is we're not great at coming up with genius ideas, and we're not great at putting gold on the screen. We're really great at fixing our dinosaur bones. We're really great at going, oh, we really screwed up, and this is what we really should be doing, and then kicking our ass to do something about it.
What was the bone that you dug up that surprised you the most on WALL-E?
The humans. Basically,
to my knowledge, they started as aliens. They were like gelatinous globes.
I had this Planet of the Apes conceit that nothing would talk English in the movie, and that humanity had evolved so far from itself that they were a silly cartoony version of complacency. They had become big Jello blobs, and they were literally like gelatinous blobs you could see through, like a Jello mold, and their eyeballs were like fruit, and they would not speak like you or I. They even had a kind of talk like that, and they wouldn't know they were human. They wouldn't know that was their past. It was just so hard on the brain to try and track all this and figure out So that plus I was sort of taken aback by how serious, even though it was charming and funny, you took the first act. You couldn't go silly once you got to the axiom. So those two sort of hit me and said, we gotta see ourselves in humanity a little easier, and it's got to hold the integrity of the beginning of the movie. And so we said, well then, let's take evolution back. Let's make them go the opposite. Let's make them all chatty. There's nothing to do but talk. The English language is very strong and alive, and let's make them be big babies. Let's make what evolution is saying, that there's no reason to grow up anymore. You have no use. So why give you all these strong limbs to do all this stuff? And it made this great analogy of going to the toddler phase and just having to stand up for the first time or again. And so that really was the big left turn.
That was also how you found your climax to an extent, right? Because that movement for the humans is when the toddler is learning to walk for the first time.
Well, yeah, once I realized that, WALL-E made everybody else change. WALL-E wasn't the one that was really changing. WALL-E was the keeper of the flame of what the point of living was about. Then it really clarified how everybody should be affected and what their role should be in that.
The concept of no dialogue. It's been discussed a lot.
It's funny. I never, ever said that phrase in my life, in the conceit of this.
It's beautiful.
It was a foreign picture.
Yeah.
It was a character that spoke robot language to another robot that spoke a different robot language. And that's, to me, what was interesting. I had no interest in silence. So,
but you were also watching silent films on your lunch breaks for over a year, to my knowledge.
Only because I knew
right?
you were going to be forced to get more information out of the visuals. You were only going to be able to rely on the inflection and the perceived intention of the line, but you were never going to know the specifics of what they were saying unless they said an actual word you knew. So more pressure, a greater amount of pressure was going to be on the visuals. So let's learn from the masters, and we watched everything Keaton and Chaplin did.
Talk about your habit for a second. When you write, how many hours a day do you write?
I'm horrible. I have been trying for now 15 years to figure out when my writing time is. I'm not a night person. I'm not a day person. I'm an under duress person.
Most writers are.
Because I learned how to write when it was like, oh, we need something now, and I'm like either on the floor, writing, or we didn't have room in the house, and the babies are sleeping at night, and I'm in the kitchen, trying to do something, and And that's sort of it's sort of like guerrilla writing is how I learned. So now that what would you like, Mr. Stanton? I have like a room now, and I can call my hours, and I don't know what to do with myself. I can't say I'm that productive that way.
So
I ended up procrastinating until I have no time left, and I'm like, all right, now I know this, and I'm back.
What do you do when you get writer's block? How do you solve it, if you get it?
One of the things I do is it's all mind games about finding objectivity, finding a way to look at your stuff as if you weren't the one that wrote it. So I'm a big proponent of printing out something after. Like I learned to write on the word processor. That's what gave me the guts to write. Because to me, I didn't do well in English in high school. My wife has to correct all my grammar and spelling for me. Thank God she did really well in school. And what gave me the guts was when I realized a word processor allowed you to cut and paste and basically type really bad and then fix it later. And it gave me the guts to just spit out my ideas without getting all caught up like, oh, that's a horribly written sentence or whatever. And, I've gradually gotten better over time just for doing it. But then I saw it as sculpting. And I was like, oh, I get that. I get sculpting. And so I can't write with pencil and paper. That's just, it's too confining. So what I'll do is I'll type on a laptop, and then I have to print it out. And then suddenly there's just this weird thing. For seeing it on the printed page, which is not how I initially wrote it, I don't see it as my own work, and I suddenly can sort of be critical of my own work. So, and I have little tricks like that I try to do to myself.
Couple quick questions, and we're going to open it up to the crowd. Hello, Dolly. Where the hell did that come from in this movie?
I remember when I came up with that idea, I was listening to, I think on my iPod or something, and I turned to my wife and I said, I just came up with the weirdest idea, and I think I'm going to be asked why Hello Dolly for the rest of my life. and sure enough, I think that's going to happen. But I don't mind. I very early on thought it would be really cool to open up the movie on images of space, real images of space, like how beautiful it truly looks without trying to embellish. And knowing that there was this little lonely robot that was in a polluted world where it was so covered in cloud and smog that he never got to see what clean stars were like. It's an LA experience, we all know. And so you get to visually introduce his hopes and dreams without you knowing it, just at the beginning of the film. And then putting old-fashioned music on it, because that was his heart, that was his romance. So in a weird way, you're meeting Wally, his hopes and his dreams and his inner soul, before you meet him. And I thought that just on frame one, you go, I'm not used to this on an animated picture. And that would be good. It would sort of be a little promise, like we're not going where you think you're going to go. And so then it was like, what classical, what old-fashioned music, and that could be anything. And I had some stuff that just made it seem too Woody Allen. And then I had French swing music. And then Triplets of Belleville came out. And
that would eliminate that
amazing, pantomime film with French swing music. And I was like, well, everybody's going to think I stole from that, so I'm not going to do that anymore, which was the best thing that could have happened to me because I had to search harder. And yes, I did enough musical theater as a kid that I knew enough plays to go through, and one of them was Hello Dolly. And I eventually got down the list, and I got to Put On Your Sunday Clothes, and I'm just like, clicking through, and it just goes out there, and I was like, whoa. And it was literally, that was it. It was like, ta-da. And I said, that works. That's so crazy. It could work. And I couldn't justify the rest of the song. It was just the weirdest idea. And I was so embarrassed that I wouldn't tell anybody for like a month I had this idea. I'm just going, how am I going to, if they're going to think I'm crazy, how am I going to get this across? And I finally justified it to myself that why this seems to be working, no matter how many ways I look at it, is because the song in the play is about two naive guys that have never left their small town, and they just want to go out to the big city for one night and experience life by kissing a girl. And I said, that's Wally. And so then I said, okay, now I can justify why I'm doing this. And that led to Jim Reardon saying maybe he saw it on a videotape, that's how he knows it, and that made us find the other song, which gave me the idea for Holding Hands. So then it became Kismet, and I was like, which is another play. And I said, we have to get the rights to this, or else I can't make this movie. So that became, and that's in the very first script. Very first draft of the script is Hello Dolly.
You also created a close-up of them holding hands because it didn't exist like that in the movie, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was good because it was an important part of your film.
I'm sure there's some purists that are like, you can't do that.
No, I was impressed. Structurally, at the 30-minute mark or so, Eve shuts down when she gets the plant. It's what gets you off the planet. Did you always know it was going to hit around there?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, that first act fell from the heavens in my lap. I've never had something fall together so
was it
nicely.
difficult for the rest of getting them out into space?
Yeah, because I didn't know where it
revolt?
was going to go. And I mean, if you've ever, I gave this lecture at your expo last year, and if you've ever seen me give the lecture, I tell other people, know the punchline to your own joke.
Know the ending.
Know the ending, and it'll inform it. And I was breaking my own rule, and it was because the idea came to me that way. I had no real say about that epiphany, so I pretty much braced myself for a real hard slog to figure out where we were going. And once I did the hard work of going back and changing whatever I needed to change in the first act to make it all seamless. So it's still the same advice I would give to somebody.
It is seamless.
It was just way more arduous than I would have wished on it. You know?
All right, blazing fast questions that we're going to get it to the crowd. It's an election year. Some people have said, "Oh, is this an eco movie?" I think it's more than that. What's your quick?
Well, look, there's no
quick
way.
Response.
This movie's had so long to gestate.
Right.
How the heck could I have known all this was going to happen?
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest with you, I never saw it as global warming. I never say that. I thought it was this really fantastical little kid point of view of covering the world in trash. I mean, that's not really going to happen, and nobody's really threatening that that's really going to happen. That's all I did. I put trash everywhere. And that's a 6-year-old point of view of the future of something going bad. And so I thought that was a real fairy tale way of looking at it. And the reason, I got to be honest, I had him find a plant before I ever knew what the hell the story was going to do. Because I loved the representation of something real being found by him. He was this man-made machine that had something real inside him. And he was surrounded by man-made material. So I obviously thought he would have some unconscious kinship to finding something real. So to me, it was a symbol for what's really important. What's the point of life? What's the truth about everything? Not just hope, but what's the truth about the point of living? And so my whole premise that I worked under was irrational love defeats life's programming. That we can all, robots, yes, they are literally programmed, and it took this irrational love of this robot, this Wall-E, to break you out of these habits. But we as human beings can fall into our own habits, our own routines, and in our day and age, technology is really easy to do that with. It's not evil in and of itself, but it's the crutch we choose right now in our lifetime to just get preoccupied so I don't have to deal with you. So that I don't have to further our relationship or deal with that hard thing that maybe we didn't discuss about. We can just sort of stay focused on Tetris or the newspaper or whatever. Keep the iPod on. It's amazing now. You can be at in Times Square and everybody's got something in their ear and we're all next to each other, but nobody's connecting.
And that's the thematic you hit when the humans collide and they stop looking through their visors.
One
as well.
premise and only one premise through the whole movie. And I mean, I've been told since day one, you're not supposed to have several points to your story. You're supposed to have one. And so I made everything service that premise. And I can stand by that for any aspect of the movie and any choice I made.
Yeah, because especially when the humans have their own awakening as well,
Yeah.
it works as well.
So I just wanted to believe that the world, whatever condition it's in, will be a better place if everybody reconnected to the real point of living, which is loving one another. That was it. That was it.
I think a stereotype for a creative person that always serves them well is that they're able to adapt, as you said earlier. And, some movies, they find that they've made a mistake and they need to turn it around at the last minute. Mm-hmm. Being in the digital age, as we all are, you guys made a big change after a Portland test screening. That was a big deal, and that you had to break it to your crew of, guys, you did a great sequence, but talk about that change.
I will fully own up to making this wrong turn or missing this opportunity. I always thought for some reason that Eve should be the one that's hurt by the autopilot and be sent down to the trash, and Wall-E would fix her, and then they'd go back. And all the same stuff happened with him trying to stop the hollow detector from lowering, getting crushed, and then him getting fixed. And but it didn't have that oomph that you wanted. And when the Brain Trust sort of saw it, sort of all the other directors, and it got sort of suggested that maybe it should be the other way around. Maybe it should be Wally that gets hurt, and now everybody that he's affected has to rise to the occasion based on how he's influenced them to see it through. And maybe it should be in question from that moment on, that how hurt is he? And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, of course. And it's only going to make him more heroic and more endearing for fighting against the pain and the broken aspect of him to try to still save the day. And that whole trash sequence was completely animated and rendered and lit. And it's in the DVD. You'll see a whole sort of parallel universe version of that sequence. And there's some good gags in there that I was sad to lose.
Did your team want to kill you when you came to them with that change?
This is what's great about them is I've always had an honest relationship with them. I admit when I made my mistakes, and so they're used to that. So usually what will make them get up and want to keep rowing is if they really do believe it's a better idea, because they want the best film possible. So the test is, if it's that much better of an idea, it'll be obvious. So I pitched it to them, and they were like, of course. And suddenly everybody pulled out all the stops. I really am so grateful.
How long did it take to make? Your schedule, if you could call it a schedule?
To redo that?
No, sorry, just the entire movie. Was it a 4-year process?
Oh, all the movies are 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the actual production of our movies is 2 years, but the story
bringing the story
is 4 years, yeah.
How much would you say the budget is, if you're able to say?
I really don't know. I'm
seen
literally
it
like la 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 la.
Yeah. I've seen it
reported.
reported
Give me
on
what I want. Give me what I want. Yeah.
Box Office Mojo says 180 million. Is that at all?
I would believe any number, frankly.
All right. I love it. To this date, it's made 480 million worldwide, so it's certainly made.
I hope
its
it didn't
money
cost
back.
that much.
No. It's made that much. That's profit. That's the good money. We're going to open it up to the crowd for the questions. Right there, you sir in the glasses. Excellent question. The choice to show live-action humans from the past usually breaks the fourth wall. It worked here.
I was in a bind. And, actually, to be honest, some people really don't like it. Some people do. I was in a bind. Hello, Dolly's live action. And I wasn't interested in having him see a CG faux representation of Hello, Dolly. I thought all the charm would be lost. So I've set a precedent. Anything you look at from the past is us. So I said, well, where's the dividing line? Do I make everybody live action? I thought, well, I can't even physically get the movie made if I do that. So I said, all right, anything in the past on videotape is us. Anything current, present day, future of the gels and everything on the Axiom is CG. And I just had to pick a dividing line.
It worked. Another question. Right there, second row. Question was regards to, will you ever put the legendary Finding Nemo pitch on DVD or the story reel for The Incredibles on DVD?
The pitch was our pitch of me just on a stage to 900 licensees because I had nothing to show. So I thought, well, I've pitched the movie before to Steve Jobs and John Lasseter to loan a room and it's worked, so maybe it'll work for 900 people. So it became like FDR, a one-man show kind of thing. And it worked. But I think you had to be there. I think it loses something. It's like when you tape, the school play and then you watch it later and you're like, ooh, so I don't think it would ever translate as much as you think it would. I do think it was that engaging for the people there. And also, there's no way you can listen to me pitch it now that the movie's done. It's just, then you'd be comparing. And the Incredibles reels were that cool, but here's the rub about all our reels. We use scratch music from soundtracks from other movies for all of our reels. And we can't afford to pay the license for, all that music. So the sad truth is we'll never be able to sell and show exactly how we do our reels because of that. And it's so much of what gives the juice and life to it. I mean, if you ever were lucky enough to visit, we could show it to you unofficially, but that'd be about it.
A few more questions. You, ma'am, in the light blue. Question was about a teaser trailer that was more Pixar-oriented than Wall-E-oriented.
Well, I maybe I shouldn't assume that you weren't happy with that, but I was really happy with it in the sense that when I was going to school and in high school and stuff and in grade school and loving movies, I remember teasers truly teasing me. And I remember E.T. was just 3 fingers going around a door and a date. And I feel like we've become such an impatient society and we want our cake 2 years before it's time to have our cake, that you're losing a lot of romance and ammunition out of making people have to wait, and making them want to know more, and anticipating something. So if I frustrated you, I meant to.
You, sir, right here in the front row. The question was in regards to the expense of making a digitally animated movie versus sometimes Japanese anime could be more adult because they have less of a cost. No one's ever broken really a 3D CG feature-length adult feature, have they?
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to not do with the technology, but how long it takes to make and all the salaries you have to pay. That's really where, it's not the only reason, but it's the biggest cost. It just takes a lot of people on full-time 9 to 5 for 2.5 years, which is more than a live action is for full-time work. So that's your biggest cost. What was the anime question? I'm sorry.
It was just, he was comparing it to Japanese anime having adult films.
Yeah.
Do you think the expense of these films that are family-oriented, 4-quadrant, could ever be leveled down so that we can see adult-oriented?
Well, I think it'll always come down to cost. If you can make it cheaper, it's no different than any other kind of movies. The less it costs, the more risk people are willing to take.
Cool. A few more questions. Oh, my God. All the way in the back, you, sir, he's standing up. You mean 2D, right? Yeah, actually, that's a great question to talk about.
You got to remember,
2D animation.
I can't speak for people in their 20s, but almost everybody that I went up the ranks through, we all were taught 2D. That's what we fell in love with. That's what made us want to go into the business, and that's what we were trained in. So I feel awful being the poster child in any way, indirectly or directly, for the demise of 2D because it's what I love. I just happen to be using 3D and I know Brad feels the same, and John feels the same. So we're doing our best to try and bring it back alive at Disney Feature.
Now that
but
Disney
honestly, the reason it died, you can probably point at a couple things, but the biggest reason I believe it died is because the stories were inferior. And that, 2D medium itself was the involuntary scapegoat of all that. And it was just too easy to just make the victim of it, and which is sad. I think I would want to believe, things like Persepolis and Triplets of Bilbo. I would just want to believe that they're making a foothold and not letting 2D die any more than it has, and hopefully rise it back again. It may always end up staying a little less of the popular medium, but who cares? As long as they're good. I just want good movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's what amazing what you guys are doing at Pixar. Yes, you're using the top technology, but you're telling extremely character-driven, well-told stories. Yeah, and that's what I consider
That's what makes
success.
us go like this when everybody says, oh, it's 3D. We got to make a 3D film.
That's
it's
not
like,
it.
all right, you guys, we're trying to tell you the truth, but okay.
You, sir, right here. Question was with regard to Roger Deakins' involvement. He was listed as a visual consultant. I've seen the DVD. On the DVD, they show Roger Deakins coming down and spending some time with you guys on your lighting.
Yeah, well, I was convinced that the software that we had been using, that we had designed for our cameras, was incorrect to capturing exactly what the physics of real cameras do. In other words, it wasn't capturing all the imperfections that are part of what make it something that you're familiar with after all these years of your lifetime watching movies. And I wanted to capture that. And I wanted to know as much as I could about controlling that because I was watching a lot of Gus Van Sant movies, and I was particularly charmed by how he and Harry Savides, his cinematographer, were using focus in Finding Forrester. They were using shallow focus. And almost everything would be out of focus in the movie, and there would be like conversations with 4 people, like 4 high school students at a table, and whoever was speaking, they just subtly shift, so just the front plane of their face was in focus, and you weren't even conscious of it, but that was helping you like pay attention to who was speaking next. And it made everything intimate in this urban setting with all this chaos going on with all these other high schoolers. And I said, that's it. That's the way with a movie without very little dialogue that I can control and create intimacy with these metal boxes. But I didn't have that kind of finesse and that kind of look coming out of these virtual cameras that we had. So we hired Roger Deakins did a workshop for like 2 days to show you how, just 101 on cinematography. We thought that couldn't hurt. And so he came, and it went over so well, we begged him to stay for a couple weeks and just see how he was fascinated with how we did what we did, because it's so opposite of how he approaches it. When we're going for the same goal, but by different means we get there. And he was a quick study. And, you know, he spent a lot of one-on-one time with my directors of photography, which are two different people, the lighting department and the camera department, whereas it's just one person in live action. So he spent time with both of them. And it was really, honestly, all about simplicity, all about dealing with the limitations of what you have and having single light sources or knowing where the light sources are coming from, not just trying to light it from all over the place. It's like, okay, if there's just one lamp in the room or there just happens to be natural sunlight coming from a window, let's just light from that. And that kind of simple thinking. And so we made these artificial rules for ourselves that I think really paid off. We said, look, there's only light in the truck if we know where the light's coming from. We're going to have Christmas lights and a TV screen. The cameraman's only going to fit where a cameraman could fit. Yeah, we could put the camera anywhere, but we're not. We're going to treat it like I'm really there. So cameraman can fit this far in the corner with his camera, then fine. And then we even animated like what it would be like to have to hold it and the inertia your muscles would take if you had to sort of lift the camera real quick. And how it sort of barrel distortion sort of happens and things go out of focus when you have narrow focus and stuff, and all those things. And I felt that I didn't expect anybody to ever really consciously appreciate it, but that the sum total of that would be much more comfortable shoes that you're familiar with watching any movie. And you just might invest a hair more in your subconscious that this might really be happening. And that would make Wall-E that much more charming when he came to life, as if a real machine just came to life in front of you right here. And that was the whole goal for it. It wasn't to show off. It wasn't to say, oh, how cool, photorealistic can we be? It was to achieve that charm.
It was also, as you said on the DVD, to kind of put some of the imperfections that people have been working on getting out of these great lenses and everything back into your computers. And at one point you argued with the programmer about the code, right?
Well, that was this whole thing about when I said I don't think our cameras are doing what they're supposed to be, we went to the TDs who are technical directors who have all the programming and are brainiacs and know everything that we don't, and they would do all this typing and go, nope, the math's right, sorry. And you can't work with that. You know, we didn't, you know, we can't prove them wrong. It's like a mechanic telling you what's wrong with your car, and you can't really prove it. And I knew they were wrong. So what we did is we hired a camera crew, and we got a real 70mm Aeroflex camera, and we gridded tape on the atrium of our lobby, and we made styrofoam real life-size cutouts of Wall-E and Eve, and we shot with all these different lenses, all these different versions of what the camera might do and what the lenses might do, and racked focus and pulled focus and zoomed and dollied. And then we made a virtual set that was scaled to the same thing with virtual versions of them, and did the same thing with what was supposedly our virtual lenses of the same number and everything. And we compared them, and they didn't look similar at all. And then the TDs couldn't, you know, trick us. It was like, nope, you're wrong. You know, they don't work, and they had to fix it.
We have time for one last question. You, ma'am, standing up. Her question was in regards to the statement of showing where we're heading with the human beings that can't walk for themselves anymore and stuff like that.
Well,
what kind of statement?
To be honest, it came out of a joke I've always made with my college roommates of like, someday we're just going to become a thumb and a mouth. Because I'm spending my whole day just, you know, somebody's getting me Del Taco and I'm just changing channels all day, you know, and so it was just sort of first it was sort of a joke commentary on uselessness. That's where I went with the baby thing. But to be honest, what really got me finding some truth in the situation of the humanity on the Axiom was we had an advisor from NASA, a man named Jim Hicks who advises NASA on long-term residency in space. And the reason they don't send a man to Mars just yet is because they haven't solved how to simulate gravity 24/7 the entire time. He basically said Kubrick was right, that
the running
centrifugal running track that was constantly going, you would have to do to not have disuse atrophy kick in, which is basically you would start to have bone loss, rapid bone loss, and you don't get your bones back. Anybody that's spent any sort of extra time in space has been physiologically screwed up forever. And they don't like announcing that to everybody, but and so they're trying to solve it. They don't know whether they can do it through engineering. They don't know whether they can do it chemically by tricking the body. But once I heard that, he says, we've literally had arguments like, if we don't fix this right, we send some poor guy out there, he's just going to become a big blob. And I went, there you go. You know, I want to believe that man never gets anything perfect, so for as much as they simulated gravity in that Axiom, it probably didn't work perfectly, and after 700 years, It slowly took its toll, and we weren't helping it by having no reason to get up, you know. So it was really about being useless. You know, that's where I came up with the baby thing.
What's next? What can you tell us about that you're working on now, or can you?
Well, yeah, I'm doing another sci-fi film. It's an adaptation. It's the first time I've ever done an adaptation of an Edgar Rice Burroughs book called Princess of Mars. And you got to be a real geek to know about that book.
It's big for the genre.
But I am too, so hey, there you go.
So that'll be live action?
We don't know. It's going to be a hybrid of some sort, of course, to get it right. And but it's all this year has been about getting the script right. Matter of fact, I just passed in the first draft this week. And
you happy with it?
Yeah, it's a great first start. You know, I've never gotten anything. I mean, again, for anybody that's a writer, I've always tell people, like, look, I'll get it right the 6th or 7th or 8th time. I won't get it right the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. If you can handle waiting for me to get it right, then we'll be fine.
Anything else you could tell us for Pixar coming up?
Yeah. Up is the next film that I think the trailer's already out for that, which is Pete Docter's baby, and I keep calling it a senior citizen action adventure film. And marketing for some reason doesn't like that, but I love that. I think that would make me go see a film. And it's really it's so Pete. That's one of the things I really am proud of about Pixar is that we've invested in the filmmakers and really let them dictate the tone, the style, the use of the computer, what the look's going to be, so that there's really no sense of a factory, that there's these rules of what a Pixar film have to be. It's like, no, it's really a reflection of the artist that's making it. And I think as people more and more get to know who we are and who we've always been, you can see more of our individual stamps on some of our earlier projects and see who was who. But and then after that, I think we've already announced Toy Story 3. Everybody knows Toy Story 3 is coming out of that. And
Michael Arndt's working on that, correct?
Yeah, he's pretty much done now.
Yeah.
But he was a real coup. We actually got him on before Little Miss Sunshine came out. And everybody's like, oh, it's got to be a worthy 3. We were saying that to ourselves. It's got to be a worthy 3rd. There's like, what is there? Return of the King. I think that's about it. What other movies is there a good 3, And I think it is. I think it's really good.
You've been very generous with your time. I can't wait to see what you do next. Give it up again for co-writer and director Andrew Stanton. Thank you. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer and director Andrew Stanton for coming down and being so generous with his time to talk about his latest film, WALL-E. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.